Hey, welcome back to another edition of Stuff You Don't Usually See. This edition, I'm going to be recording this radio segment with Michael Ostrowski, our Planning and Development Services Director. Michael is fairly new to the organization, so we're going to be talking about his background, how he got here, and some of the major initiatives going on in his department. So that's what we are going to do for this radio segment. You ready to go?
I'm ready.
Okay.
Thanks, Jay.
Let's make this happen. Let's do it. Make sure I'm rolling. And I am. Well, thank you and good morning. Thanks for letting us be here. My guest today is Michael Ostrowski. He is the Director of Planning and Development Services for the City of College Station. This is the first time we've actually really got a chance to have a real talk.
It is.
Well, thanks for doing this.
Thank you for having me.
So how long have you been with the organization now?
So I started just at the end of December of 2020.
Okay. You picked a great time to come here. Talk about your path, like your career path that brought you here. Where have you been?
Yeah, so I'm originally from Wisconsin, born and raised in a small town in Wisconsin, about in the central area. Started in Stevens Point, Wisconsin as the mayor's assistant, right out of undergrad. After that, went to graduate school down in Milwaukee, graduated in 2008, had the ability to go back to central Wisconsin as the Director of Planning and Economic Development for a smaller city in central Wisconsin called Wisconsin Rapids. Spent about 2 years there and then headed back to my hometown of Stevens Point, where I spent about a decade there as their community development director.
Now, Stevens Point had a university in that community, right?
It did. So it had a University of Stevens Point, had a student body population of around just under 10,000 people.
Okay, that's like a standard chemistry class here.
It is.
Yeah. Okay, so then what?
So after that, made the jump to Texas, for various reasons. One big reason was the weather. Just really couldn't handle the Wisconsin winters anymore. But
right.
But from a career growth and potential there, one of the things that I saw really important, especially going to Texas, was Texas is a very fast-growing state.
Right.
Population-wise, a lot of growth going on in Texas, and it really gave me the opportunity to come and step into a very different scenario where you're really focused on kind of managing the growth that's coming to make sure that it's really beneficial for your community.
Yeah.
So in 2019, made the jump down to Texas and San Marcos, where I served as their Assistant Planning and Development Director until before coming here at the end of 2020.
So is being a planner or being involved in planning and development, is it the same basically in Wisconsin as it is in Texas and so on, or are there nuances and differences that you had to adjust to?
Sure. Some of the bigger differences dealing with is just the different legal requirements and laws that you have in Wisconsin versus Texas, as well as just some of the faster pace of growth that you're seeing in Texas, and you're being more reactive to that and trying to set up initiatives where you can be more proactive in the long run. And some of the major initiatives that we're going to be talking about today probably will address that in the future for the city of College Station.
Yeah, and your arrival's really at an interesting time related to some of these big initiatives. One of them is where we are in our whole comprehensive plan review and update, and so we call that the next 10, right? Where we are in this period of time with our comprehensive plan. Where are we in the process for your office?
Yeah, so our current comp plan for College Station was adopted in 2009, and we've spent the better part of a year or two doing what was called the 10-year evaluation. So it's like a 10-year checkup of kind of where we're at in that process to see if any amendments need to be made, any changes, different growth projections coming in that, may make us pivot a little bit and readjust. So right now, over the past year or two, we've done the evaluation, kind of doing large public outreaches, gathering input from the citizenry and making sure that, we're on a path and where we want to be. So we've taken that input, and right now we're kind of incorporating that into the new draft of our comprehensive plan update. So taking all those comments and those recommendations that came out of the evaluation report and then putting that into our new comp plan. Next steps will be over the summer, we'll be doing a pretty robust public engagement process again to make sure that what we heard during that evaluation period is what is included in the comprehensive plan now. And so following that, throughout the summer, doing that public engagement portion, and then going through formal adoption of that comprehensive plan a little bit later this year.
Why should people care about a comprehensive plan? What does this mean for them?
So our comp plan is really the guiding document pretty much for everything that majority of what our department does, but it really sets the vision for any development, land use related growth within our community for the next 10 to 20 years. So, as rezonings come in, as different developments come in, we want to make sure that we have the appropriate land use designations on property within the city to make sure that that growth is appropriate for that area and that, it's appropriate for the city long term. One of the cool initiatives that we're going to be doing with the public engagement process this time around is that we have a number of changes to what's called our future land use map, and that's the map that we look to say, here's what the property should be, over the next 10 to 20 years used for, versus kind of maybe what it's used for now or what it's zoned for now. So one of the things that we've done through our GIS division within our department is create this interactive tool, this interactive map that citizens can go online, look at their property, type in their address, find out, am I slated for a change, what that change is, why we're recommending that change, and what that may mean for them if a change is slated for their property.
That's available now, or that's coming?
That is coming. So
Okay.
over the next month or two, we should have that tool available for those citizens. And any significant changes that we see from a land use perspective on a particular piece of property, we do plan on notifying those landowners individually to make sure that they're aware of that potential change.
Any critical dates that people need to watch out for?
I would start watching out for the end of July for a big push for our public engagement series, and then also that'll probably carry through to mid-September to make sure that we're also capturing a lot of the student engagement as they start to come back for the fall semester.
Okay. All right. Makes sense. Now, tell me if I'm right or wrong here. Part of our comprehensive plan, does our comprehensive plan also contain sub-plans such as individual neighborhood plans?
Yeah, so our comp plan will recommend, various areas that may need further planning or further analysis that we do. So we've done a number of small area plans recently, or actually over the years, probably about 10 years ago. Areas like Central College Station, the Eastgate neighborhood, South Side, Wellborn area.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the things that we'll be doing after our comprehensive plan is adopted is doing a neighborhood plan audit. So taking a look at all those neighborhood small area plans that we've done and seeing kind of where they're at, right? What's been accomplished, what hasn't been accomplished, why hasn't it been accomplished?
Yeah.
Do we still need to accomplish what was set out to be in those plans? Do we need to, make certain amendments to those plans? Because they're starting to get at the end of their planning horizon. Typically, they last for about 10 years. They don't really expire, but after about 10 years, you have enough change that's occurred that may need an amendment to them. And, some of the recent requests that we've seen for future land use map changes or rezoning requests, particularly in the Wellborn area, maybe have been denied because of the small area plan, recommended certain areas stay residential and commercial focus maybe on more of the Wellborn corridor. So we need to take a look at that to see if, those recommendations that were in that plan are still relevant today.
Okay, that makes sense. You're right. So many things have changed, not just the number of people who have moved here, the complexion of these neighborhoods. Staff has changed, councils have changed, economic conditions have changed. I'm guessing all those things will kind of come into play, and we'll see.
They do. I mean, all that comes into play, especially with population projections. So
Yeah.
when we did our comp plan back in 2009, it's a very different growth projection that we're seeing now. I mean, we're anticipating probably nearly 30,000 more residents by 2030, and that's a lot of residents coming into this community and making sure that we have enough area for them and where they're going to go.
Yeah. So I'm cheating a little bit because you gave me a little list of things that we might talk over, before we got in here, and redevelopment plans was one of your items. Tell me about that.
It is. So, as part of those small area plans, we also have areas that we want to focus on redevelopment. So, a lot has changed over the past years, especially with annexation requirements, for example. 2019, a state law came down that really prohibits a city from unilaterally annexing property, beyond their city borders. And really, for annexation to occur, you're going to have a petition from those property owners. So a lot of growth is going to likely occur in the kind of current city limits of the city, which means redevelopment initiatives happening. So some of the areas that we want to focus on, especially probably over the next year or two, are going to be the corridors like University Drive as well as Texas Avenue, kind of in this general area of City Hall, looking at major redevelopment areas for different planning efforts, especially with now the City Hall project moving forward and kind of what happens with this site. City Hall really serves as a catalyst for a lot of future potential growth along this corridor, so we want to make sure that it's planned appropriately.
And I guess things like that are really playing the long game. It's not like you turn that ship in a redevelopment fashion in a hurry, right?
It's correct. I mean, this is a long-term vision. Our comp plan is 10, 20 years out. These redevelopment plans are a little bit more focused and more strategic, where they're, focusing on areas like 2, 3, 5 years out as we start looking at those.
Yeah. I've had conversations with Natalie Ruiz in economic development about Harvey Road. And the amount of transformation that probably is required in that corridor, in that which is another main entryway into the city and to the university, but even something like that will take years and years and years before it ever really, I imagine, takes shape.
It does, and that's why we need to get the planning efforts underway, because the actual implementation, you're right, does take many years, if not decades, in order to occur.
Yeah. A couple other items on your list. I'll let you take them in whichever order you want. You had suggested ordinance amendments and a noticing requirement. So how do those keep you busy?
Yeah, so some of the things that we're looking at was also on the Planning and Zoning Commission's plan of work. One of the things that we're looking at for an analysis, which could turn into an ordinance amendment, is parking requirements and minimum parking requirements for the city. Many communities throughout the country are either reducing their minimum parking requirements, just finding out that over time, communities have required a lot more parking for their regulations than what was really needed for a business. And you've probably seen throughout businesses and having massive open vacant parking lots where communities are starting to think differently now, that maybe we don't need as much parking to require for these developments, or parking at all. So we're going to do an analysis and look at our parking requirements, make sure they're in line with our community vision, and they could lead to changes to maybe reduce some of those requirements, which would allow for better land use and better development of those properties. Instead of having large swaths of parking area, maybe we have a few more developments in those parking areas instead.
Do you guys tend to get feedback from some prospective businesses that are trying to comply with current requirements, and they say, this seems excessive, we don't really need this, why do we have to do this? You kind of hear that?
Yeah, we do, and it's not just unique to College Station. Right. I've heard it in pretty much every community that I've been in, and a lot of them are appointment based type industries. So if it's like a doctor's office, a medical use, typically they know exactly how much parking that they're going to need versus one space for 300 square feet of floor area. So we do hear that, and sometimes it does prohibit the ability for those businesses to come in. And then also from just a development standpoint, the more businesses and the more development that we can have within a certain area, the better, because most of those utilities and services are already installed versus having that expand outward.
Okay, makes sense. Okay, how about noticing requirements?
Yeah, one of the things that we're also looking at is taking a look at our noticing requirements that we have for various types of projects, whether it's comprehensive plan amendments, rezonings, and just making sure that we're providing noticing requirements to get people into the process earlier. And one of the things that we'll be looking at is possibly requiring or strongly encouraging neighborhood meetings where developers meet with neighborhoods if there's a major change within those areas. So we're taking a look at what our current noticing requirements are and whether or not they need to be amended in order to engage the citizenry sooner rather than later, because we hate to have them just show up at a meeting and have a whole bunch of concerns that we could have addressed on well before getting to, let's say, a planning and zoning or city council meeting. If we can have meetings beforehand to address some of their concerns, that usually works better throughout the process.
So what are the next steps for more discussions about that? Does that happen at the neighborhood level? Does that happen at the planning and zoning commission level? Yeah, how does that happen?
Yeah, so one of the things that will be coming up soon will be on the city council workshop item. Just really, there's an item going to be coming up here in the next couple of meetings about supporting the communication between the neighborhoods and the development community. So we'll be identifying some ways that we can do that and potential changes to our noticing requirements that I think will be beneficial for everybody.
Good. All right. So we covered a lot of ground. Is there anything that we didn't cover that you want to make sure that people know?
Yeah, I mean, we're also working on a lot of other initiatives, a lot of transportation initiatives. So as you can imagine with our comp plan, as we start changing land uses, we start looking at our thoroughfare plans and ways to identify potential changes there on our thoroughfare plan map, and as well as looking at different ways to address congestion within the community. I know that's been a top issue throughout the community, and we're focusing on looking at ways to identify kind of where these areas of congestion are and ways to deal with those.
All right.
A lot of stuff going on.
Hey, I appreciate the conversation.
Likewise.
Hey, and thank you guys for letting us come on and talk about the city of College Station. That's stuff you don't usually see. Okay, we did it. I think we did it.